Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr. This is episode 275 of CryptoBiography, and I'm calling it In Canada. So, over the last week, I was, in fact, in Canada with my wife, and we were there for roughly a week. So we got back a couple days ago, but it just wasn't enough time for me to accomplish enough writing for the episode today. So we will get back to The Smallest Magician next week. And in fact, I did get some writing done, just not enough to make an entire episode out of it. So thought I'd talk a little bit about where I was and what we were up to. So my wife of 2 years now is Canadian, and her family is all in Canada. Although interestingly, neither of her parents are originally from Canada. One is from Australia and one is from England, and they both just happened to end up going to Vancouver, British Columbia, and meeting there and making a family there eventually, and that's where her family is now for the most part. At least they're all in the Vancouver area. So we went and visited, not all of them, but some of them, her mom especially, and one of her sisters and her family. And we didn't have time to see some of the others. Unfortunately, it's just even in the course of a week, it just isn't quite enough time. We were basically on Vancouver Island, which is a large island, like surprisingly large. I think it's some 150 miles long, something like that. No, I think it might even be more than that. It takes a good 4 hours or so to go from the northwestern, which is the upper tip, to the southeastern part, which is where Victoria is. Victoria is the largest city on the island. And yeah, so it's like, if you take the highway anyway, it's about a good couple of hours from Victoria to Nanaimo, which is the largest city on the east coast north of Victoria. Victoria itself, it not only is the largest, but it also has several sort of suburby sort of little cities around it that have sort of all sprung up. So it's a pretty good sized metro area, actually. It's nowhere near the size of Vancouver, but it's probably pushing 1 million, something like that. Pretty good sized area, really. The west coast of the island is virtually uninhabited. It's too rugged, basically. It's all mountainous on the west side of the island, and just hardly any people live there at all. So the main cities are all up the east coast of the island. So if you go, good couple hours basically north of Victoria, you end up at Nanaimo. Nanaimo is like the largest city outside of the Victoria area. And it also is one of the cities where the ferries come from. Most of them are in the Victoria area, but there is a large ferry station, I guess, whatever you call it, in Nanaimo. And that one takes you mostly from Vancouver, basically. There are some other stops as well. And then if you go north of that, there's a couple of little cities, and one of them is where her sister is, but they're very, very small. So, yeah, so my wife and I, since my family is all now in Denver, or at least my close family is all in Denver, the Denver area, and we're not planning on moving there. The question is, where are we going to end up? And so the exact timing is up for debate. We are still determining that, but we will probably end up in Canada eventually. So, yeah, so we did a little sort of looking around to see what the various parts of the island were about. We could also look at Vancouver itself. Her mom is actually in Vancouver usually. We saw her extensively in this trip, but that was because her mom came over with us on the ferry to her sister's place, and then we were all at her sister's place for half of the week almost. And then we spent, like I said, after we were at her sister's place and visiting, then we kind of struck out on our own to sort of explore the island and see where we might want to end up. And Victoria itself and the environs are very nice. It could be there. And like I said, we're not sure the exact timing, but we're going to be looking at that. And doesn't feel too different from the United States yet, not on, sort of this casual, sort of very short-term sort of thing. I mean, there's the obvious, the signs are in kilometers and, there's and stuff like that. But, nothing really sticks out immediately. Like, people are about as nice as they are in the United States. We did see some trucks with Canadian flags, just like you see trucks with U.S. flags, and well, they usually also have Trump signs. But I don't know if I saw any Canadian trucks with flags and also some sort of sign like espousing a particular candidate or party or anything that I saw. But they were definitely like in that sort of same vein, where it was like a very oversized truck, and then like multiple Canadian flags hanging off the back of it, which my wife was a little weirded out about, because she's actually been in the United States for quite a while, but of course she did grow up there, and she was there until she was 30 or something like that. And that just wasn't it just wasn't something that happened, especially not in Vancouver and BC. It's more the sort of thing that she associated with sort of the middle of the country, which is a little bit like, the Texas and that sort of area of the United States. The middle of Canada is a little like that. It's more rural, it's more rugged, it's more conservative, and so on. So she was a little weirded out to find that sort of thing starting to happen in Vancouver and Victoria and Vancouver Island. Lovely weather. It's very much what I'm sort of used to in like the Pacific Northwest of the United States, especially along the coast, although I've lived inland as well when I grew up in Idaho and so on, where it's a little drier and so on. But if you're near the coast, you usually it's relatively temperate, and it's very rainy, especially in the fall. When we were there, it was actually not rainy, but that happens too, especially since it's basically we were there over the course of the end of summer and beginning of fall, and that sort of thing. So anyway, so we checked it out. I think Victoria's a lovely place. Nanaimo's nice. The whole place is really, really, really beautiful. We saw we went on some rather nice hikes. Saw some beautiful lakes and lovely mountains and all that sort of thing. Just what you'd expect. It's funny. The island is so big that it doesn't really feel like an island a lot of the time. Like, yes, you can be on the coast, you can see the salt water, but you can be in on the interior, and because it's whatever it is, a couple hundred miles long and maybe 60, 70 miles wide or something like that. It's a very, very chunky island. You can be just miles and miles away from salt water. You can't smell the ocean. You can't see the ocean. There are just regular, freshwater lakes and rivers and ponds and everything else. And it just looks like it, sort of anywhere else in the Pacific Northwest that I'm used to. And the BC area is, not that different from the actual island, of course, because why would it be? Like, the plants have all migrated over to the island from the mainland, I assume. Same with the animals. There are pretty much all the same animals that you'd expect to find in the northwest of the United States and or Victoria, BC, or sorry, just British Columbia, on itself. They have elk. They apparently have bear. I didn't see any bear, but they have bear. They have deer. They have, eagles and hawks. We saw several of those different kinds. We saw, all that sort of stuff. Some rather lovely butterflies that we saw. Really, really, very, very, very exactly not that different, which makes sense. It's physically not that far away. And so I think it'll be interesting to see, what happens, if we end up spending more time there and what that will be like. I don't know exactly what it'll be like, and it's funny because I've never really thought of myself as the type who would become an expatriate of any kind, someone who is living abroad in another country for an extended period of time. But, that's just how it seems to be working out. When you fall in love with someone, then you just sort of, you accept, if you love them, you accept life as it is with them. And, in this case, I fell in love with a woman who is Canadian and her family's all from Canada, and she would like, at some point to spend time with them, which means basically moving back there at some point. So, yeah. So I never really thought of myself as someone who would live outside the United States for any particularly long period of time. I do love to travel, although I haven't done enough of it. And I certainly hope to travel more. But actually living outside of the United States is not really something I had considered on my own at all. But it's something I must consider and will consider. Anyway, if you have any comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, cryptobiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Facebook or Twitter. And thanks for listening. Words of Music copyright 2022, CryptoBiography LLC. All rights reserved. Characters and events are fictional, fictionalized, or satirical. Of course, that's when we're doing fictional stuff. But anyway, thanks for listening.